Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44 of Masechta Pesachim. So it's a packed daf, very geschmacka daf, but very, very packed. And so at the beginning we continue discussing Heter mitztaref le'isser, that you can have some mutter things joined together with usser things to create a proper measure, a shear, to create a issue, a problem. And we really explore that initially through the lens of miduma. It's come up from time to time, a mixture of truma and chulin. Okay? And then we get into the sugya of tam ki'ikr, which is also an interesting sugya of when you have something not allowed, but the something not allowed has been removed, and all you're left with is the flavor of the thing that is not allowed. We say tam ki'ikr, that the flavor is as if the thing itself is there. These are what's that called? What's that stuff called that you learn in smicha? Oh gosh. Oh yeah. Oh gosh, that's why I don't have smicha, Oh gosh, it's there's Orach Chaim, Yoredeya. It's Yoredeya stuff. Alright, let's go weiter. So says the Gemara and Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, 4 lines in this page. Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamer la shmaita. Aha! So Rav Dimi was sitting and he was saying over this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. Of course, Rav Dimi was one of, you see, I can't say for sure. I always thought that there were these chevra who traveled back and forth from Eretz Yisrael to Babylon. I think that's what it is. That Rav Dimi, Ravin, they would, Ula, they would kind of travel back and forth sharing things, right? And I almost feel like they get the raw end of the stick, or whatever the phrase is, that they just get everybody's problems from both ends, meaning they'll come back. We saw the other day with Ravin on Daf something. We saw, it was on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. We saw Ravin came back to Eretz Yisrael and he was saying something over in the name of Rav Sheshes, and Rav Yirmiyah was like, you nudnik, you guys don't know what you're talking about, right? He said that Bavel, it's such a dark place that you guys have such dark, silly teachings. And anyways, so then we have Rav Dimi over here, he's saying something in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and then Abaye has his questions. It's like broken telephone, you bring something from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, the people in Bavel have kashas. You bring something from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, the people in Eretz Yisrael have kashas. So it was pre-WhatsApp. They didn't have WhatsApp yet. Anyways, so Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamer la shmaita. So Rav Dimi was saying over the sugya of Rabbi Yochanan. Who could tell me what Rabbi Yochanan said? Rabbi Yochanan said that b'chol Torah kula, in general, we say that Heter is not mitztaref le'isser. That you have to have a proper shear of the isser. The exception being nazir. That if you have a nazir, that if he has less than a kazayis of wine, but he dips his bread into it, and now with the bread there's a kazayis of you have a kazayis total. Now there's less than a kazayis of wine, but with the bread that you're eating a kazayis total of whatever you're eating, so then that would be enough for him to have to start all over again. So that would be the only case, says Rabbi Yochanan, where Heter is mitztaref le'isser, where we can join, add permissible stuff to the non-permissible stuff in order to create an amount that would create trouble. So Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamer la shmaita. So Rav Dimi was sitting and he was saying this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, that the only place where we say that Heter is mitztaref le'isser is nazir. Amalei Abaye Rav Dimi. So Abaye says to Rav Dimi, is that really true? That in general, when it comes to Isurin, we do not add Heter to Isser? V'atnan. We learn in the Mishnah. Okay. It's a Geshmaka Mishnah. But the proof and the question is really only going to come after we work through a few lines over here. So here's the Mishnah. Mikpa shel truma v'hashum v'hashem shel chulin. So if you have some kind of mikpa is like a porridge of sorts. It almost feels like we're doing brachas sugyas, but some kind of a porridge. Now the porridge is truma. Porridge is truma. But in the porridge, there is some garlic, there's some oil, and the garlic and the oil is chulin, i.e., the vast majority of this mixture is truma. There's some spices that are chulin. V'naga tvul yom b'miktasan, and a tvul yom touches part of it. Now, of course, a tvul yom, as we know, we already know l'maisa. Do we know this? We might even know this from the first daf in Shas already. But anyways, first line in Shas. But a tvul yom, by now we know very well, is a sheni l'tuma. And a sheni l'tuma is poselas a truma, right? It means that if a sheni l'tuma touches truma, the truma becomes possible. It can't be mitame other truma. Now, but if it's chulin, unless of course we know you're Rabbi Akiva, but let's not go there. And so, so a sheni l'tuma is not mitame chulin. It doesn't make any difference for chulin. So, great. So we have this mixture. This mixture is the vast majority of it is truma. The spices, the flavors, just whatever, the garlic and the oil is chulin. A tvul yom touches this mixture. Pasul is chulin, so everything is now pasul because the vast majority of this mixture was truma. And if a tvul yom touches truma, he passes the truma. So the whole mixture is pasul. Now, hamikba shel chulin, but if the porridge was chulin, i.e. the vast majority of the mixture was chulin, vashum vashemen shel truma, and the garlic and the oil in there is truma, so i.e. a tiny percentage of this mixture is truma. V'noga tvuyam b'miktasan lo pasul ela makom mago bilvad. And then a tvuyam touches, he just puts his finger into one area. So we say, lo pasal makom mago bilvad. So only that place where he touched, you probably want to take a spoon and scoop it out, but the rest of the mixture is edible to a zar. So, okay. So what is meduma? Let's talk about meduma for a second. Meduma, it's come up a few times, but meduma is a mixture. It's a mixture of chulin that some truma got into it. Now, the general assumption, I believe, is that meduma is asur midrabanan. What it means is asur midrabanan is that midrabanan only a kohen can eat it, right? Meaning you have a whole mixture of chulin and then some truma falls into it. So now what? So if we treat it as truma, so only a kohen can eat it. Now, midoraisa will say that whatever fell into it is batul berov. The majority of it is chulin. So, midoraisa, you would be, a non-kohen would be able to eat this mixture because whatever truma fell into it is batul. However, we say that only a kohen can eat this mixture because some truma fell into it, unless there are 100 times the amount of chulin as there is truma. Now, that being the case, that really midoraisa, this truma that fell in is batul berov. So ve'avinamba. So let's go weiter for a second. Ve'avinamba. So we ask the question: makom mago amai psula. How come where the tvul yom touches would become pasul? Habat leilu tavlin berov. But whatever. Remember, we're talking about a mixture that the vast majority of it is chulin and just the spices, just the garlic and the oil is truma. Now, if we're saying that meikar adin, that mida oraisa, this mixture, whatever truma fell in is batul berov. So, and it's only mida rabbanan that we say that a non-kohen is not allowed to eat it. Well, then really this garlic and this oil is batul berov, is nullified in the majority of chulin. And therefore, when a tvul yom touches whatever part that he touches, it really makes no difference practically speaking, because whatever truma spices were in there are batul, are nullified, are non-existent. And therefore, why do we say that the place that the tvul yom touches is pasul? So now, the Gemara answers, it says, Rabbi Bar Bachana, matam ho v'zar loka alei michzais. Interesting. So now, the Gemara answers that actually meduma is not midrabanan, it's midoraisa. And Rabbi Bar Chana says that if a non-Kohen were to eat a kazayas, and we're going to have to define a kazayas of what? But let's just leave it at a kazayas for now. That if a non-Kohen eats a kazayas, let's say, either a kazayas of this mixture or either a kazayas of truma in the mixture. We'll have to get there in a minute. But for now, let's just say a kazayas of meduma, okay, just to have something to refer to it as. So says Rabbi Bar Chana that actually, if a non-Kohen eats a kazayas of meduma, so then he will be chayav malchus. So meaning, if a non-Kohen eats a kazayas of truma, of course, the punishment is misa b'dei shamayim. However, this isn't fully truma. This is a mixture of chulin and truma. It's meduma. And therefore, what Rabbi Bar Chana is saying is that it's mida oraisa. Mida oraisa, if you have chulin and some truma falls into it, only a Kohen can eat it. A non-Kohen cannot eat it. And says Rabbi Bar Chana, if a non-Kohen eats a kazayas of meduma, he's going to be chayav malchus. He's going to get lashes. Okay, so here we go. Now here is where the question is coming. Now you guys got it up until now. Now you're going to continue to get it. Here's the question. Now, hechidami, what does it mean that a non-Kohen is going to get malchus for eating a kazayas of meduma? Lav mishum de'eter mitztaref l'Heter? Is it not because Heter is mitztaref l'Heter? And that, my friends, is Abaye's question. That, what does it mean that if a non-Kohen eats a kazayas of meduma, he's going to be liable to lashes? But he's not eating a kazayas of truma. I mean, the only truma in there was the garlic and the oil. He's not eating a kazayas of that. That will be a lot of garlic and oil. Mistami, he's eating a kazayas of the porridge, of the mixture. And we're saying that even though only a small amount of what he's eating is the truma, but we're going to say that the chulin is going to join in with the chulin, which of course he's allowed to eat, is going to add to the iser, is going to add to the truma, and because we're going to have heter mitztaref l'Heter, because we're going to add the truma, the chulin to the truma, that is why he's going to get malchus. So Abaye wants to ask from here that, you see, there are other cases that in general we can say heter is mitztaref l'Heter, as we see by meduma. What do you guys think of the quality of that question? Pretty good, right? Lo, Rav Dimi says no, that's not why he's chayav malchus. My kazayas diika kazayas b'chdei achilas pras. Aha. So Rav Dimi answers no. When we say that if a zar eats this meduma, he's going to be chayav malchus, it means because he mamish ate a kazayas of truma. He mamish ate a kazayas of the garlic and the oil. That is truma. Now how you can eat a kazayas of oil and garlic that's truma when it's just spicing and adding flavor to a porridge? You're going to have to eat a lot of porridge. So Rav Dimi says, yeah, we're not talking about one bite of porridge. He sits down to a meal and he eats porridge, and over the course of the meal, he's going to be eating a kazayas of garlic and oil. And for that reason, he's chayav malchus. So it's not because of heter mitztaref l'Heter, it's because he's going to be eating a kazayas of truma, and he's not a Kohen, b'chdei achilas pras, therefore he's going to be chayav malchus. Now what's k'dei achilas pras? So it's come up a few times. K'dei achilas pras is the amount of time that it takes to eat half a bread of 8 eggs, right? We learned in Masechta Eruvin, we learned in Daf Daled Amud Beis Masechta Eruvin, K'dei achilas pras came up because it's the shear that we learn out from wheat, the amount of time that it takes to eat a half a loaf of bread of 8 eggs, and we're talking about a bread of wheat. That's the shear that we learn out from Eretz Chita. Anyways, but we also learned in Masechta Eruvin that by an Eruvei Tchumen, so you have to have mazon shtei sudis, enough food for 2 meals. So 1 loaf of bread would be enough for 2 meals, and which means that 1 meal would be half of that loaf of bread, and therefore a half of loaf of bread, the whole loaf would be 8 eggs, the half of the loaf would be 4 eggs. So the amount of time that it takes to eat a wheat loaf of bread, half of a wheat loaf of bread, and that is the equivalent of 4 eggs worth of bread, the amount of time that it takes to eat that. Now that is generally the time that is associated with eating, meaning if you eat, it's considered a normal eating if you eat within that time frame. If you spread out your eating to larger than that time frame, then it wouldn't be considered like you ate within a required amount of time. And therefore, what we're saying over here is that as long as, Rav Dimi is saying, as long as this fellow who's eating the meduma, and he's not a Kohen, eats a kazayas of truma over the course of the amount of time that it would take a normal person to eat this half a loaf of bread, I don't know exactly how long it is. I don't know, probably anywhere between 5 minutes and 25 minutes. I don't know exactly how long it is, but as long as he eats a kazayas of truma within kedei achilas pras, so that would be considered that he ate an entire kazayas of truma, and therefore he will be chayav malchus. So it's not because of heter mitztaref leiser, says Rav Dimi, it's because of he's eating a kazayas of truma b'chdei achilas pras. Okay? Now, but Abaye challenges, he says, yeah, but would eating a kazayas b'chdei achilas pras be midoraisa or malayin? Rav Dimi says, yes, it is midoraisa. Ihachi, says Abaye, if so, amai pligi rabbanon alei Rabbi Eliezer b'kutach habavli. Ho ho. Remember yesterday we learned about kutach habavli? We learned about a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbanon. Rabbi Eliezer says that if you have chometz dagan gomra idei taroves, that if you have mamish real bread and it's in it some kind of a mixture, right? So such as kutach habavli, this dip, this Babylonian dip that had bread in it, and it was just part of a dip. So Rabbi Eliezer says it's chometz dagan gomra idei taroves, and it's a Torah prohibition. You get malchus. The Chachamim say it's lo klum. It's completely mutter. It's completely permissible. Now, if we're saying that eating kedei achilas pras, i.e., eating a total of a kazayas over a while, meaning over this spread out over the amount of time that it takes to eat this amount of bread. So if we're saying that eating achila kedei achilas pras is midoraisa, well then how could the Chachamim say that you're potter for eating kutach habavli on Pesach? I mean, even if you're not going to be eating a kazayas of bread like in one bite, but you can eat a kazayas of bread over time as you're eating this, this dip. So then how come the rabbis argue with Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to this kutach habavli to say that you're potter, but won't you be eating bread chametz on Pesach over kedei achilas pras? Then the Gemara asks, but Abaye, what? Elamai mishum heter mitztaref leiser. But what are you going to say? You're going to say that the Rabbi Eliezer says that eating kutach habavli is a problem because of heter mitztaref leiser. If that's the case, then sof amai pligi rabbanon alei Rabbi Eliezer b'kutach habavli. But still, then why do the rabbis argue on Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to kutach habavli? Won't they still say that heter mitztaref leiser and it'll be a problem to eat kutach habavli? So elahanach l'kutach habavli. No, leave alone kutach habavli. The leis bekazayis b'chdei achilas pras. That rather kutach habavli, you will not be eating a kazayis of chometz b'chdei achilas pras because ibe'ene de kashar v'ka'achile b'tele daite eitzel kol adam. If he's mamish just going to take a big spoonful of whatever chometz is in that kutach habavli and eat it like that, well, that's not generally how you eat this, moldy dip kind of thing, by eating huge spoonfuls of kutach habavli. You don't do that. It's some kind of a dip that, I don't know, take bread and you put a little bit on it, but you're not going to eat too much of it at one time, and therefore you're not going to eat it b'chdei achilas pras. And even if you do eat it b'chdei achilas pras, you take like big gulps of it, but that's not the normal way to consume it, so that becomes irrelevant anyways. V'im mashta kashat v'ka'achile. And if you can eat it normally, like regular people eat it, which is you just dip stuff into it, but not very much on each dip, so then you're not going to be eating a kazayas of bread b'chdei achilas pras. So that is why the Chachamim would argue and say that kutach habavli, you're not chayiv b'chlal if you eat it on Pesach. Okay, but there's no nafkaminas in terms of kedei achilas pras or Heter mitztaref l'Iser. Okay, so Abaye wanted to ask from Avdimi, from Meduma, to say that we should say that the reason why a non-Kohen gets Malkus for, at least according to Rabbi Bar Chana, for eating Meduma, is because Heter's mitztaref l'Iser. So we see it's not only by Nazir, to which Avdimi says no, it's a matter of Kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, and that was that Esvei. So now Abaye asked a kasha on Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi said that achila b'chdei achilas pras is midoraisa. Abaye asks, shtei kederis achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. If you have two pots, one of them has chulin in it, one of them has truma in it, v'lefnei shtei medochos, and before these two pots are two mortars, achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma, and in one mortar is spices of truma, and in the other mortar is spices of chulin. And one of the contents of one mortar fell into one pot, and the contents of the other mortar fell into the other pot. Mutarin, we could say that both pots are permissible to be eaten. Shani Omer, because I'll say truma l'soichat truma naflu v'chulin l'sochulin naflu. I'll say that the chulin mortar fell into the chulin pot, and the truma mortar fell into the truma pot, or the contents of each mortar. And therefore, a non-Kohen would be allowed to eat the chulin, because we can assume that it's chulin, the chulin spices fell into that pot, not the truma spices. Now here's the question. Now, Rav Dimi, if you say that eating a kazayis within a achilas pras is midoraisa, well then amaya minan shani omer truma l'soch v'chule. So then why are we willing to say that it's okay, a non-Kohen can eat the chulin pot, because no big deal, we can just assume that the chulin spices fell into the chulin pot. But what do you mean? At the end of the day, there is a chance that the truma fell into the chulin pot, in which case there's truma spices in there. Now, in terms of the percentages, it might be a very small percentage, but if we're saying that eating a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is midoraisa, it's an issue midoraisa, well, shouldn't we be concerned that you're going to eat a kazayis of these spices of truma that potentially fell into this chulin, and therefore you're going to have a non-Kohen eating truma, which is a big deal. So it must be rather, Abaye wants to argue that k'dei achilas pras must only be midirabanan, and therefore in this case, when we're not sure what fell into it, so we're not going to go crazy over here. Amalehanach l'trumas tavlin dirabanan. So Rav Dimi says, yeah, but the truma of spices in the first place is only midirabanan anyways. The pasuk says, reishes degancha tiroshcha v'tzarecha, that the first of your grains, wines, and oils take truma from them. Midoraisa, you only have to take truma from grains, wines, and oils. Therefore, spices, it's only truma midorabanan anyways, and because we're not sure which one fell into which, so we could say that we can assume that the chulin fell into the chulin pot, and a non-Kohen can eat the chulin. Eisvei, Abaye asks another kasha against Rav Dimi, shtei kupis, achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. This time, if you have two, boxes or containers, one has chulin and one has truma in it, and we're talking about pashit wheat over here. So it's midoraisa stuff. And in front of these two containers are two sa'as, one of chulin and one of truma, also wheat. So we're talking about wheat. And then this sa'a falls into this box, and this sa'a falls into that box. We say, okay, no problem. A non-Kohen can eat the chulin box. Because we'll say that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma fell into the truma, all good. A non-Kohen can eat the chulin. Now, if we say that eating a kazayis of something b'chdei achilas pras is an issue midoraisa, well then how can I simply say, well, let's just assume that the chulin grain fell into the chulin box. But if what happened was that the truma fell into the chulin box, well then you're going to end up eating truma b'chdei achilas pras, and that'll be a problem. So amalehanach l'truma b'zman hazeh d'rabanan. To which Rav Dimi says, yeah, but truma b'zman hazeh, truma nowadays is only midrabanan anyways. Very interesting. And therefore, if it's midrabanan anyways, and in this case of the suffix, it's we'll be willing to say that you can assume that the chulin fell into the chulin, and therefore you can eat the chulin. But, says Rav Dimi, I will still argue that the concept of achilas kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is still midoraisa. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, that kind of wraps up this portion, the Heter mitztaref le'isser, Abayis kashas with Avdimi. Now we're moving on, really going back to what we said at the end of the day yesterday, I guess connected to Heter mitztaref le'isser, but we're now moving on to the next sugya of tam ki'ikr, which, I don't know, I find to be an interesting sugya. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it seems like the real stuff. Maybe because it feels like the big leagues. All the smicha guys at Yeshiva University, they were always talking about, and it feels like they were always talking about this stuff. Taruvos, Yoredea, and tam ki'ikr sounds like it's one of those things, So, if maybe after today's daf we can go over to Yeshiva University, we could say, hey, we know this stuff, maybe we can get smicha too. That would be nice. All of Babel and Tam will all get smicha together, we'll all become rabbis. I don't know. What do you guys think? You want to be a rabbi? Probably not, right? What do you want to be a rabbi for? Alright, let's go weiter. V'hai mishras la'ach yudasa hami bai l'chidetanya. So now, the Gemara asks, one second, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, so he says that from the fact that it says Mishras Anovim, by the Nazir, so we learn out that Heter is mitztaref le'isser by Nazir, that if you take some bread and you dip it into some wine, and there's less than a kazayas of wine, but together between the wine and the bread you have a kazayas, so then we say that we'll add the Heter to the Isser, we'll learn that Heter is mitztaref le'isser, fine. But, V'hai Mishras la'ach yudasa, does Mishras really teach us Heter is mitztaref le'isser? We need Mishras to teach us the following, which is Mishras litain tam ki'ikr, to say that flavor is like the thing itself. Shimshara anovim b'mayim, that if you took some grapes and you soaked them in water, v'yeshboin tam yayin, and now the water has the flavor of wine, chayiv. So he's chayiv. So if you have a nazir is not allowed to drink wine. And what we're saying is even mishras anavim, if you take grapes and you soak them in water, so now the water tastes like wine. Reb Neil. Anyways, so he takes the grapes and he soaks them in the water. Now the water tastes like wine, and what are we talking about? And he's a nazir. He's not allowed to drink wine or grape products. So we're saying even mishras anavim, even though he takes out the grapes and there's no grapes in there anymore, but the water has a flavor of grapes. So then he's not going to be allowed to eat it. So it's tam ki'ikr. There's the flavor, and therefore because the flavor is there, it's as if the grapes themselves are there. Mikanata done the chol Torah kula, and from here you could apply from nazir to everywhere in the Torah. Umanazir she'en isuro isur olam, ve'en isuro isur anoah, ve'esheter li'isuro also b'tam ki'ikr, kilayim she'isuro isur olam, ve'isuro isur anoah, ve'en eter li'isuro, and din she'asa tam ki'ikr, v'adin lo'or l'b'shtayim. Got it? Let's read it again. So from here, from nazir, you can now apply to all the other cases in the Torah, because this is why. Umanazir, when it comes to nazir, right? Of course, a fellow who decides that for a minimum of 30 days, he is not going, I don't know, maybe it could be less than that, but stam nazir. So if a person just says, I'm going to be a nazir, so he's basically taking upon himself not to cut his hair, not to drink wine, not to become tamei meis. So, when it comes to nazir, she'eni suro isur olam, this prohibition against drinking wine is not going to last forever. Only as long as he said he's going to be a nazir for, right? If he said, let's say 30 days, so 30 days, it's over. Ve'nisuro isur anoah, and even during those 30 days, he's allowed to get benefit from grape products. He just can't eat them. Maybe he could feed it to his dog or whatever. Ve'esheter li'isuro, and look, quite frankly, as we learned in Masechta Eruvin, he can, if he wants to, he can just go and be matir his neder and become a non-nazir. So we learned that Masechta Eruvin, if I'm not mistaken, because we said that a nazir is allowed to make an eruv tchumen with wine, because he can always just undo his neder. So also about tam ki'ikr, and yet even though there's all these reasons to be lenient, we still say tam is ki'ikr. So kilayim. So if you have kilayim, for example, if you plant grapes and wheat together, sheisur isur olam, you're never going to be able to eat that. Visur isur anoah, you can't get benefit, of course, as we know. Vein heter liisuro, and there's nothing you can do to make it permitted. Einu din she'asa tam kicker. Well, then certainly it would make sense to say tam is kicker there. That even the flavor of the kilayim will be enough to treat it as though there's kilayim there. Vu'adin le'orla b'shtayim, and also you can apply it to orla. It's got two similarities. That while ein isuro isur olam, right, orla will not always be forbidden. Only during the first 3 years it's forbidden. After the first 3 years it's permitted. So, however, there is, it's asur ba'ana, orla is asur ba'ana, as we learned a few weeks ago. And also, there's nothing you can do, if you have fruit that is orla, that's within the first 3 years, there's nothing you just pasha can't eat it. There's nothing you can do about that. So it has two similarities. So also we'll say that by orla. Also we'll say tam keker. No. So what's the question? The question is this. Why is Rabbi Yochanan learning out from Mishras that Heter is mitztaref le'isur? I thought from Mishras we learn out tam keker. So the Gemara answers, Hamani Rabbanani, Rabbi Yochanan Damar Rabbi Akiva. So this Brisa, I think it's a Brisa. This Brisa, which is learning out from Mishras, Tam Ke'ikr, that's the Rabbanon. Rabbi Akiva, however, learns out Tam Ke'ikr from somewhere else, as we're going to see. But from Mishras, he learns out Heter's mitztaref le'isur. And Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan therefore holds like Rabbi Akiva. Hey, Rabbi Akiva, which Rabbi Akiva are we talking about? So, Ilim Rabbi Akiva the Masnisen, if we say Rabbi Akiva from the following Mishnah, D'Tnan Rabbi Akiva Omer, says Rabbi Akiva Nazir Shashar Pito Bayoyin. If you have a Nazir who soaked his bread in wine, Veshbalitzayev Kedei Kezayis, and now, the assumption being for now, that there's enough between the bread and the wine that it's a Kezayis, Chayav, well then, he is going to be Chayav. It's going to be a violation of his Nazirut. Now, the assumption being that he has less than a proper amount of wine, but together with the bread, there is a kazayas of wine. And Rashi points out something super interesting. In the Dibra Maschel, Dilma Miyayin L'chudei, about 2 lines into the Rashi, he says, V'heach Meshayin Kazayas Yayin. How do you get a kazayas of liquids? Usually a liquids is measured like by revius. How do you get a kazayas? Kazayas is usually, right, an egg's worth is usually by like food. So memale kli mipeh lepeh umevi zayis v'nosen l'socho v'yayin ayotzeu kazayis yayin. Isn't that interesting? What you do is you take a vessel and you fill it up to the brim with wine, and then you take an olive and you put it into the vessel, and whatever wine got displaced and went over the sides, that would be a kazayis of wine. Anyways, so we're saying that between the wine and the bread you have a kazayis. So we see heter is mitztaref le'isur, but the Gemara says umimai. To be pasum yayin. How do we know that what we're saying is that there's a kazayis of that between the bread and the wine there's a kazayis, but there's not enough of the wine itself to be a kazayis? Maybe it means that there's a kazayis of only wine. But if you can say, yeah, but if there was a kazayis of wine on its own, then obviously it will be a violation of his nazirus. So what do I need the bread for? So K'mashlan da'afagav de ta'aroves. No, the chiddush over here is that yes, there is a kazayis of wine, but the chiddush is that it's not be'en, because it's soaked into the bread. So it's not like your mom is drinking wine, you're like eating wine that's in bread. So I may have thought to say that even though there's a kazayis of wine, it would be okay in this case, because you're not just like drinking wine, you're eating bread that has wine in it. So, Ela Rabbi Akiva the Brisa. So rather it's Rabbi Akiva from the following Brisa, where we see that Heter is mitztaref le'isur. The Tanya Rabbi Akiva Omer says Rabbi Akiva Nazir Shashar Pito B'yayin, a Nazir who soaks his bread in wine, V'achol Kazayis Mipas Umiyayin Chayav, and he eats a Kazayis between the bread plus the wine. That is how he gets to the Kazayis. So then he's going to be Chayav. He's going to have to start over. And so we see from there that Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that when it comes to a Nazir, when he soaks his bread with his wine, Heter is mitztaref le'isur, and it's so we see that by that Rabbi Akiva says by Nazir Heter is mitztaref le'isur. So now the Gemara wants to know, okay, fine. So from Mishras, Rabbi Akiva learns out Heter is mitztaref le'isur. How does he learn out Tam Ke'ikr? What do you guys think? Rabbi Akiva Tam Ke'ikr minale. How does Rabbi Akiva know Tam Ke'ikr? Yolef mi basa b'chalav. He learns it out from cooking meat and milk. Because after all, by cooking meat and milk, is it only a flavor thing? And therefore it's also achanami, loshna. Here also by tam kiker, there's no difference. Meaning, if I take a roast, okay, and I boil it in milk all day, and then I remove the roast from the milk and I strain it or whatever it is, you can't tell that it was roasted in milk. And now I serve it to my guests. There's no milk in there anymore. The milk is gone. It's just meat. However, there's flavor of milk in the meat. And therefore, and we're saying that it's a problem. So we see tam ke'ikr. That is how Rabbi Akiva learns out tam ke'ikr. So, v'rabbanon, v'basar b'chalav lo gamrinon. The chiddush, the rabbis say, yeah, but you can't learn out anything from basar b'chalav, because basar b'chalav is a chiddush. It's a unique case. What's so unique about it? My chiddush, what's so unique? If you're going to say, oh, you know what's so unique about basar b'chalav? It's unique in that I can eat meat and I can eat milk, but I can't eat them together. That's what makes it so unique. But that's not really so unique, because kilayim nami. What about shatnez? Or even just like seeds and stuff, joining them together. Shari. You can have, whether it's materials, I can have linen, I can have wool. Whether it's seeds, I can eat grapes, I can eat wheat. Right? Each one individually is allowed. Uvadade aser. But when you join them together, all of a sudden it becomes prohibited. So it's not such a big chiddush. It's not like so unique that basar b'chalav you can have on their own, but not together. There are other examples of that. So what's unique about basar b'chalav is that mida oraisa, you could take your meat, you could take this roast and soak it in milk all day. Don't boil it, don't turn on the flame, but you could push it, soak it in milk all day long, and then eat the meat. And mida oraisa, as Rashi points out, mida rabbanan will be also. Mida oraisa, that would be okay. The issue is only cooking it. And therefore, that's what's unique about milk, meat and milk, is that not only, whatever, I'm not going to say that, but what's unique about meat and milk is that there's some, it's specifically cooking it. Why? I don't know. What does cooking have to do with anything? I could soak it in meat, I could soak the meat in the milk all day long, and that wouldn't be any problem. But when I cook it together, all of a sudden it becomes a problem. So that's what makes basar b'chalav unique. And therefore the Chachamim are unwilling to learn out tam ke'ikr from basar b'chalav. Rabbi Akiva nami basar b'chalav adai chidushu. Rabbi Akiva is going to have to assume also that basar b'chalav is shtickle unique. So why would he be willing to learn out tam ke'ikr from basar b'chalav l'chol Torah kula? Okay, so rather Rabbi Akiva learns out tam ke'ikr from gi'ulei nachrim, that if you have a pot that was used by a non-Jew for whatever he was cooking with, and now there's going to be flavors of whatever he was cooking in the pot, well then a Jew would be unable to use that pot because there is flavor that is going to get into the food. So gi'ulei nachrim lavtaim ba'amu v'aser hachnami loshna. So just like by using the pot of a non-Jew, so what's the issue? There's no actual food. It's not like his actual food is going to be in your food, but flavors from his food will be in your food, and therefore tam ke'ikr, and it's like his food is there in your food, and therefore it's going to be a problem. So v'rabban gi'ulei nachrim nami chiddush hu. The Rabbanan say, yeah, but you can't learn out tam ke'ikr from gi'ulei nachrim because it's also a chiddush. What's the chiddush by gi'ulei nashim? What makes it? What nashim? No, you're allowed to eat gi'ulei nashim. You're allowed to eat food that was cooked by a woman. Otherwise, what would the men do? Let's go weiter. So, no, gi'ulei nachrim. Nami chidushu. So the pots of the non-Jews is also a chiddush. What's the chiddush? Because in general we say nosein tam l'fagam is mutter, that if you have flavor that is imparting sort of bad tasting flavors into the food, it would be permissible. And therefore, these pots that were used by non-Jews in order to cook stuff, well, whatever flavor was absorbed in the walls of the pot and is now getting into your food is old, stale flavors that is going to be getting into the food. It's no sein tam l'fgam. It's imparting flavors to make things worse, not to make things better. And in general, we say no sein tam l'fgam would be permissible. And here we're saying it's not. Therefore, according to the Chachamim, it is a problem. And therefore, according to the Chachamim, it's a chiddush. Because in general, we would say no sein tam l'fgam is permissible. Here we're saying it's not. So that's why you can't learn out tam ke'ikr from gi'ulei nachrim. Rabbi Akiva, Kedavchia Breder Rav Huna, Da'amelo Asu Torah Ela B'Kedei Bas Yoma Hilkach Lab No Sein Tam L'Fgamu. Rabbi Akiva says, yeah, but Giulei Nachrim is not No Sein Tam L'Fgam, because he holds like Rabbi Chia Breder Rav Huna, who says that Giulei Nachrim is only when the pot was used that day for the non-Jews cooking, and therefore it's not No Sein Tam L'Fgam, it's No Sein Tam L'Shevach. It's imparting good, flavorful flavor because the pot was just used recently on that day for cooking by the non-Jew. That's why it's a problem. So it's not such a chiddush. It's no sein tam l'shevach. But the rabbis say, look, but let's be honest, the can't be exactly the same flavor as at the time that it was cooking. Even if it's a little bit later in the day, the flavor must have gotten a little bit worse, and therefore there is an aspect at least of no sein tam l'fgam, and still we're saying that it's not allowed. So therefore that makes Giulei Nachrim a chiddush. And therefore they don't want to learn out tam ke'ikr from there. Alright, so that was daf 44 of Masechta Pesachim. So the first half of the daf really was an extension of the sugya of Heter mitztaref le'isur, that Abai was challenging Rav Dimi to say that there are other cases of Heter mitztaref le'isur, namely meduma. So Abai says that if you have a mixture of chulin and truma, so if a non-Kohen eats it, you'll be chayav malchus, at least according to Rabbi Barbachana, who assumes that it's midoraisa. And Abai wants to argue it's because Heter is mitztaref le'isur. Because even though you're not going to be eating a kazayis of the truma, but you're going to be eating a kazayis of the porridge. And therefore whatever is not truma of that kazayis will be added on to whatever parts are truma, and it's Heter mitztaref le'isur. According to Rav Dimi, says no, even though you might not be eating a kazayis in the first bite, but while you're eating, over the course of your eating, you are going to be eating a kazayis of truma, which is achilas kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. So that is what the issue is going to be. That's why you chayav malchus. And then we got into the sugya of tam ke'ikr. The Rabbanan learn out tam ke'ikr from nazir, that if you have a nazir and he soaks his grapes in water and then removes the grapes, he's still not allowed to drink the water because it has flavor of the grapes. So tam ke'ikr. Rabbi Akiva learns that out from gi'ulei nachrim, that when it comes to the cooking of non-Jews, using the pots of non-Jews, even though the food, you're not actually eating the food of the non-Jew that he cooked, but whatever flavors he cooked are still in the pot, and therefore we see that the flavors, tam, ke'ikr, that's going to be the problem. Have a great day. Peace.